welcome to our Bitesize CMD webinar, where today we're looking at issues facing the farming community. I'm joined today by Matthew Morris, who is a land steward for the Duchy of Cornwall. Matthew, could you begin by telling us a little more about your role?
Absolutely. Hello, everybody. So yes, land steward is a fairly old duchy title, but it's effectively estate manager for the Duchy of Cornwall. And I'm the senior estate manager, so I have responsibility for the whole of the rural portfolio, stretching from, we have land in Kent, we have land in Nottingham, Shropshire, all the way down through Devon, through Cornwall and out to the Isles of Scilly. So quite a big patch. We've got land in 22 counties and 135,000 acres. So a fair patch. And I've got 5 offices, each with a team of land agents and building surveyors and sort of admin and finance based in each location. We have our Cornish office is at Restormal, just sat below the castle.
Lovely, thank you. I had no idea it was that much of a land area, so that's good to know. Cornwall is a county which is well known for farming. We've seen quite significant changes in the farming industry over recent years, including the closure of many markets. What impacts do you think these changes are having on farmers at the moment?
Well, you mentioned markets. I think actually that's probably one of the biggest changes socially for farmers. Not so long ago, there were 31 livestock markets in Cornwall. There are now, I believe, 2. And, you know, that change, that ability for farmers to go and socialise once a week has dramatically changed. And you know, farming is a lonely business. And I think that is, you know, fundamentally one of the biggest things that we've observed probably in the last few years is just that decline in the markets and their ability to go and see each other and chew the fat as they sell their, you know, calves or their lambs. I think farming generally is experiencing a massive change, and I can't underestimate the scale of it. We're seeing the support network that sits behind it in terms of government funding is being radically altered. We're going from a fully funded package that was the basic payment scheme that's disappearing. We're looking at sort of environmental based payments moving forwards. Huge amount of uncertainty in farmers' minds at the moment. The government are not, the clarity is not there in terms of what those schemes actually will deliver in terms of funding. We're perhaps seeing less emphasis on food production, which is a bit of a worry. Farmers have prided themselves on feeding the nation, and perhaps that feels like it's being nibbled away at. We've got the challenges of climate change facing our farmers, particularly, I mean, in Cornwall, you'll have all seen it this summer, you know, with the drought. And, you know, farmers actually see this first. You know, we might just notice that it's a bit hotter, generally a bit, you know, wetter in the winter, but farmers see that first because it affects their business directly. We had farmers out on the Isles of Scilly this year, you know, with boreholes running close to running dry. You know, we've had crops all over the Cornwall estates, you know, just not establishing properly because of the weather. So climate change is a real worry and a real change. And then we've just got the burden of red tape as well. The farming rules for water have recently, I'd say they've recently come in, but the sort of long arm of regulation has taken quite a long time to come down the southwest, I would say. But you know, we're seeing that as a major impact on particularly our dairy tenants and dairy farms generally. And then labour's become really challenging. You know, the labour market has changed dramatically. Obviously, Brexit has meant that finding labour from overseas has become a bit more, it's become very difficult. And for those labour intensive operations, that's a real challenge and a real worry. So yeah, that's been a real impact.
Absolutely. You know, even like one big change is huge for people to deal with, but that just the whole spectrum of change that you shared there must be almost unrecognizable to what farming was some time ago. And I suppose added to this, there's the cost of living crisis, which is hitting many of us at the moment. The increase on fuel has a particular impact on rural communities. Are you seeing this affecting farmers, particularly those that might already be struggling?
Yeah, I mean, the cost of living is, I think it's an interesting one for agriculture because it quite often the costs of running a home or running a vehicle on a farm will be sort of they generally get sort of subsumed into the farm accounts. But I think particularly with the gas and the fuel price, that's had a tremendous knock-on effect on one of the main input costs, which is fertilizer. And we've seen that at one point that had trebled in cost per ton, which has a huge impact on the farm's margins. And a lot of farmers took the decision to either reduce or eliminate their fertilizer use on the basis of that cost, and that then has an impact on the productivity, certainly in the short term. We've also seen that flow through now to the labour market. Cost inflation, labour wage inflation is creeping through. The feed cost is creeping up all the time. So on the one hand, we've got all of these input costs that are gradually ramping up, and then what we're going to see is very shortly there's going to be some quite serious pressure on prices. The consumer, because of the cost of living crisis, is going to have less money to spend on their premium cut of beef or premium cut of lamb. They're going to be wanting to get their 5 kilos of cheap protein, and that will have an impact. I spoke to one of our farmers on Dartmoor, and he's really worried about the future of the price of meat, what that's going to mean for his business. The dairy sector has seen that already. We're seeing, there's been some inflation in the milk price, but the organic milk price, which for a long time was ahead of the conventional price, has dropped below, in some instances, what you get paid for a conventional litre of milk, despite having much higher cost of production. So I think there's a storm brewing, and it's not going to get any better at the moment. I think there's been a degree of shielding because they've enjoyed high prices for their produce. But I think when those produce prices start to dip, I think we're going to see some real issues in the sector.
Yeah, that's really worrying, isn't it? And I can't believe the change in the organic milk. That's a really shocking statistic there, isn't it, about the price dropping below the ordinary milk?
Yeah, I mean, it used to be it would be anything between 20 and 25% above the price of conventional milk, and now it's we know one purchaser that is paying about 15% per litre less than the conventional price. So it makes no sense. The other thing I forgot to mention, of course, is cost of borrowing, which is very current. That is about to get very expensive, and many farmers, unfortunately, I say unfortunately, many farmers don't have access to many assets to borrow against. They may be, they may be a tenant farmer who has no property on which to secure borrowing, in which case that borrowing is even more expensive than the owner occupier. So that's going to be a real worry. Overdrafts are going to get a lot more expensive.
Yeah. Okay. So I suppose one thing I wanted to explore a little bit is often that we see farms that have been in families for generations. I guess that's the same for you on the Duchy. But in that sense, farming is more than a job for many people. It's, I guess, a way of life, a vocation. It's part of their heritage. I'm sure this brings many additional pressures to both the farmers at the time and to the younger generation as well. Do you have experience of this with people that you're working with?
We do. And we refer to our group of farmers, they're part of the Duchy family, so that family ethos runs right through our organisation and how we work with our tenants. We've got one family out on the Isles of Scilly who reckon that they can trace their ancestry and their sort of pedigree as farmers on that particular holding back to the point at which the Duchy was created in 1337. So
wow.
25, I think it's 25 generations. We thought we had the record holder in Somerset where there are 22 generations, but 25 generations is the current claim on the Isles of Scilly, which is amazing when you think about it. And no farmer wants to be the one that gets that wrong. No farmer wants to be the one that has to admit defeat. So I think that is a real it's fantastic. It's to be admired, but also I do worry that people hang on for all the wrong reasons sometimes, when actually the best thing may well be for them to think about perhaps giving up or retiring. But I see that stubbornness, and I mean that in a nice way. It's a stubborn streak in farmers. They're very reluctant to give up without a fight, and I think that's why you see multi-generational occupation, but it also relies on the landlord being a willing participant in that. And we're very much a long-term landlord, so we're very happy to have multi-generational tenancies. But that is changing nationally. The national picture is for a much shorter tenancy length, which is a problem. So you've got, if you like, you've got the older generation who perhaps cling on too long, and perhaps won't want to embrace the rate and pace of change that's coming at the moment. I mean, it is literally, I've been a land agent now for over 25 years, and I can't think of a more exciting / terrifying time in agriculture, because the rate of change is so fast. But you've also got the next generation, who in many cases will be sat there really frustrated because mum and dad won't give them the keys to the train set. And that is something that, advisors can help manage that process. But, the difficult kitchen table conversation can only happen between, the next generation and their parents. Advisors can help facilitate, but it's ultimately, it's got to be a family conversation as to when that next generation can get involved and take over. And we do see that tension, intergenerational tension, time and again, and it's not an easy one.
No, not at all. And I suppose that's a real another point where people are facing conflict as well. And actually, that's your safe space at home with your family. If that becomes troublesome, then that's really difficult as well.
Yeah.
Are all of the next generation keen to take on farms? Are they perhaps unwilling to take it on, and that must cause a different sort of tension, I guess?
Yeah, and again, it depends. It varies from family to family. We see instances where we have really enthusiastic next gen tenants, and they just can't wait, and they come back from college, or perhaps having worked in New Zealand or some other location, buzzing with ideas. They can't wait to apply it at home. And then we've got other situations where, frankly, they've seen how hard it is to be a farmer, and they just don't want to get up at 3 a.m. to go milking. And they can go and earn probably more money doing a 9-to-5 job somewhere else. And that isn't through laziness. It's just anyone that runs their own business. Certainly, I grew up. My father was self-employed, and the admiration I have for people that are prepared to do that, but I also see how hard it is. And I didn't go self-employed because I'd seen how hard it was for my father, and I took a conscious decision. I was going to work for somebody else, and I think many sons and daughters of farmers make that conscious decision because of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So during COVID, I think we all became more aware of isolation and loneliness, but this is something that farmers have been potentially experiencing long before the pandemic. What sort of support is available, if any, to farmers out there that might be struggling with loneliness and isolation, especially as you said that the markets, the reduction in markets, which has been where they would have had that social interaction?
Yeah, I mean, COVID gave us all a taste of I think what it's like to be a farmer. Actually, it is an incredibly lonely job. In many cases, you can go for an entire day without seeing a soul. And what support's out there? Well, it's really tricky. I mean, we talk about meaningful engagement in the Duchy, which is a cup of tea and a slice of cake. And that for us is the most important thing, is going and sitting around the kitchen table and listening and understanding where the business is at, and also allowing them an opportunity to just talk about life. And farmers don't always have that relationship with their landlord, and there may be few opportunities that they have. It might be their feed merchant that comes to try and sell them the latest blend of food. It might be it might be the agronomist who comes to walk the crops. But actually, those social interactions can be quite limited, and that's really something that I think the sort of farming help charities have really started to address in terms of the support that's out there, because I think that is mental health. I mean, it's apt we're having this conversation this week because it's mental health sort of action week, and we we see that has really come to the top of the radar from the point of view of the support networks that are out there now. We think about it within our organisation. We've actually got a tenant up in Herefordshire who has set up a mental health charity for farmers in Herefordshire, and he's been helping other people through his own initiatives. But then there are bigger organisations out there who are able to offer the support, and so the Prince's Countryside Fund, the 24th Duke of Cornwall, set that up as one of His Majesty's main charities, and through the Prince's Countryside Fund there are a number of farming help charities that all operate under this one umbrella. But you've got the Addington Fund, you've got RABI, you've got Forage Aid, and FCN, the Farming Community Network. And just to give your listeners a flavour of a couple of those, Forage Aid particularly, if we have a climatic disaster, if we have a flood in Cornwall in a particular location and it wipes out a farmer's forage or food crop for his or her animals, Forage Aid will actually help them feed their stock. I've seen it in action. It's a fantastic charity. The FCN, the Farm Community Network, comes together in times of crisis. During COVID, we actually got involved a little bit, and they offer advice to farmers who are facing crisis, and whether that might be they've got a particular legal problem, maybe they're having a mental health issue, that they're there at the end of the phone to try and offer support, and a really valuable service. And they also fund Farm Cornwall, who again are another sort of they're a Cornwall focused advisory service who are there to help people who are in need.
Yeah, it must be really important to try and encourage people to talk and to share their problems and to understand that they're not alone, because I guess many of the farmers are going through similar things, and so it's really important for them to network with one another in that way.
Yeah,
so,
and we sorry, I was going to say that is really important, that networking, and if we can encourage farmers to talk to each other, actually that's much more valuable than a professional getting involved, because they can talk farmer to farmer. And I've linked a couple of our farmers together who were facing similar issues, and they found it, I think they tell me they found it incredibly valuable. They probably just have a moan about me, but I think they find it really valuable just to share experiences and stories, so they don't feel they're on their own, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, it's often reassuring, isn't it, to find that somebody else is in a similar situation, and to think about how they're dealing with it, and how you are to try and help with that.
Yeah.
So bearing that all in mind, how as communities and churches can we be more aware of the issues facing our farming community, and is there anything that you think we could do to help them, to support them?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, it would have been easier had we had those 31 livestock markets, but I think if we all tried to go to the same market on the same day, they'd all feel a bit outnumbered. But I think, for me, it's a difficult one. Outreach in rural areas is really difficult because you can go and see a farmer and it could just be the moment that he's out in his field, and you've wasted probably a long drive just getting up the drive to the house. So we need to think, how can we engage? And I know in my own community church, I'm based up in the Bath office, and our local church, just little things like, for harvest, the local farmers are all invited. They'll do the readings, and it's just a really nice way of them getting involved at a very local level. But that's once a year. I think there are other opportunities. I think that there will be farming events in the calendar. I went to the Royal Cornwall Show this year for the first time. I'm only 3 years into the Duchy, and we've missed 2 years through COVID. But so I went to the Royal Cornwall Show, and I was amazed. It's actually I think it's one of the best agricultural shows left in the country. It was fantastic to see how well supported it was, and there's some opportunities there perhaps to get more involved. But then you've got all the smaller groups that are still operating, and with gusto, the young farmers groups are a really good way of getting in there at that sort of younger age demographic, and they're very active. They like a social event. So again, young farmers is a good way. There isn't really, once you're too old to be in young farmers, there isn't the same network there, which I think is a real shame. But So there's a few ideas, but I think it's just spotting those opportunities to engage and not being afraid to go and chat about the price of milk and what's the crop looking like. It's the farmers like talking about farming. That's the key. So.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your time today. I've really appreciated hearing your thoughts and ideas and sharing a bit more about some of the crises and changes that are facing farmers that we might not have been so fully aware of ourselves. So thank you once again for joining us. No problem at all. And at any point, if anybody wants to know more, the team at the Duchy of Cornwall, we'd be happy to help and at least point people in the right direction. So don't ever hesitate to contact. Lovely. Thank you very much.